All life on Earth gets its energy from the sun. Plants photosynthesize sunlight into energy, which then moves up the food chain into larger and larger animals. But it all originates from sunlight. Everything except Yeti crabs. Deep undersea on the ocean floor, the Yeti crab, scientific name Kiwa hirsuta, gets its energy from hydrothermal vents. Heat from Earth's magma gets pushed up through the seafloor where an entirely separate and alien ecosystem survives off of this energy. Bacteria and archaea that use the heat to form the basis of the food chain, the giant tube worms that eat them, and yeah, Yeti crabs. Using a process called chemosynthesis, Yeti crabs take the toxic minerals from this vented water and convert it into a new form of energy. The Earth's a big place, with a lot of weird and amazing creatures living on it that we know nothing about. But what if I told you that beyond our world, above it, there's a whole society of beings more powerful, more frightening, and more unknowable than anything this Earth has to offer? Welcome to Singularity. Gravity Falls, Oregon is a magnet for the weird and unexplained. In this small town, you can find lake monsters, fairies, living dinosaurs, time travelers, gnomes, Zeus. It gets weird. And I'm not the first person to notice it. In 2012, Dipper and Mabel Pines spent their summer vacation here and got caught up in all of the weirdness Gravity Falls has to offer. Mabel is an upbeat and lovable girl who loves all things sparkles, stickers, and boy bands. Her twin brother Dipper is a smart, curious, and adventurous young man who spent his summer trying to unlock and make sense of all the town's secrets. He was guided by a mysterious journal, one of 3, that documents all of the strange and paranormal occurrences in this town. And if you're anything like me or Dipper, then your first instinct is also to try and make sense of Gravity Falls' strangeness. Find some explanation or root cause that can explain everything from the multibear to the gremloblin. And this is completely normal. People are hardwired to find patterns, even when there aren't any. One example is Pareidolia, the phenomenon of seeing faces in faceless objects. Just try not to see a face in this tree stump or this car. Our brains see patterns everywhere. But why? We like for the world to be well-ordered and easily understood, and patterns help us understand it. The way we classify plants and animals or name stars, it's our attempt to take a chaotic universe and make it make sense. It's easier for us. If you can find a pattern, you can understand something. And if you can understand something, you can predict it. But this innate desire to have a well-ordered world leads us to seeing patterns that aren't there. We look at a sky filled with a random jumble of spots and make constellations out of it. We try to put people into discrete categories based on when they were born. It's human nature. But there are some things that don't fit any pattern. Disasters, anomalies, crises that, try as we might, just don't make sense to us. And one of these anomalies is Bill Cipher. Bill Cipher is the single most powerful and terrifying entity in all of Gravity Falls. He's a dream demon who comes from another dimension. When he got bored with it, he destroyed his original reality, burning it to the ground with all of his friends, family, and loved ones inside. Then he waited. For trillions of years, he waited outside of our world, trying to trick someone into letting him inside, letting him into our world so he can do the same thing here. He can enter your dreams to pull out your memories. He can turn your body into his meat puppet. He claims that he sees all, and seems to have as much knowledge of the future as he does of the past. When he finally made it into our world, he could shape reality to his whim, create pocket dimensions completely under his control. Out of pure spite, he turned all of the citizens of Gravity Falls into statues and built a giant throne out of their corpses. Bill Cipher is a being of pure energy with no weaknesses. Someone so powerful and so twisted that he nuked an entire reality just for fun. And he wants to do the same thing to our world. The scariest part is, there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop him. Do you feel that? That tightness in your chest? That dread in your heart as you try to grapple with a being this immensely powerful? It makes you feel small, unimportant. If entities as powerful as Bill exist, what does that say about us? That feeling is called cosmic horror. The realization that on a grand universal scale, you don't matter. It's a common enough feeling these days. Comics, television, video games, fiction is filled with beings so powerful that it forces us to come to terms with our own insignificance. If there are entities that can destroy entire realities, what can you do? How do you not go crazy realizing how far down you are on the cosmic totem pole? H.P. Lovecraft. A name so synonymous with cosmic horror that it's literally a synonym for cosmic horror. Lovecraft was a horror writer in the 1920s and 30s who pioneered this type of writing. While most horror writers of the day focused on gore, cultism, Lovecraft was obsessed with a different type of fear. Fear of the unknown. Or maybe more accurately put, fear of the unknowable. You've probably heard of Cthulhu, the giant squid monster that's going to end the world. He comes from Lovecraft's most famous story, the Call of Cthulhu. In this story, a researcher named Francis Thurston gets sucked into a plot involving a global cult, worshipping a god named Cthulhu. He's described as being some unholy combination of an octopus, a dragon, and a deformed human. Eventually, Thurston meets a sailor named Gustav Johansen, who actually crossed paths with the Great Old One. Johansen was part of a crew that accidentally released the deity, sending him on a mad rampage that would eventually destroy the world. The only ones able to escape were Johansen and a crewmate, who was eventually driven insane shortly thereafter by the sight of Cthulhu. Before the story ends, Johansen has also gone mad, and Thurston kills himself because of the knowledge of this deity. Later writings expand on Cthulhu, and establish him as one of a pantheon of dark and terrifying gods, each more powerful and dreadful than the last. Another well-known Lovecraft story is The Shadow over Innsmouth, where an unnamed narrator describes his visits to the strange town of Innsmouth, Massachusetts. All the residents of the town have a weird limping walk, strangely shaped heads, and they reek of dead fish. As the narrator continues to explore, he discovers that the residents of this town are worshipping a race of immortal fish-like creatures called the Deep Ones, offering human sacrifices to appease them. Some of the most devoted worshippers go so far as to breed with the Deep Ones, causing offspring with a strange limp and a deformed head. When a human Deep One hybrid gets old enough, they travel underseas to live in the city of Yahan-Thele. But there's more, as the Deep Ones themselves worship an even greater god, Dagon, who rules over the endless seas. Cthulhu, Dagon, Nyarlathotep, Yog-Sothoth, Biatus, so on and so forth, god after god, each one powerful enough to destroy everything we know, and we would be powerless to stop them. The most powerful of Lovecraft's eldritch gods is Azathoth, known as the blind idiot god, or the blind dreamer. According to legends, our entire reality is just a dream in Azathoth's endless slumber. If he ever wakes, all of existence will be forgotten. Do you see the connections? Lovecraft writes about monsters that are so powerful they could destroy the world if they wanted to, which is exactly what Bill did to his world and what he wants to do to ours. The very sight of Cthulhu is enough to drive people insane, just like how Old Man McGucket went crazy as a result of his knowledge of Bill. And Bill's not alone. You can see the imprints of Lovecraft's writing everywhere if you know what to look for. Something about cosmic horror just draws us in. Why? Back in the 1950s, some of the most popular scary movies had this recurring theme of normal people turning out to be monsters. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing from Another World, Invaders from Mars, these are all examples of movies where the monster is your next door neighbor. And they were all made during the Red Scare, a period of American history where a lot of citizens and government officials were worried that communist sympathizers had infiltrated the country. Is it a coincidence that during a cultural event causing people to distrust anyone close to them, a lot of popular horror movies revolve around the people close to us being the real monsters? It's not. Whenever we analyze horror fiction, we have to be aware of the cultural fears and anxieties of the time period, because they inform what people find scary. During the 70s and 80s, there were more active serial killers than ever before, so a lot of the scary movies of the time capitalized on that by featuring serial killers that have become iconic. In the 1960s, we started to see a lot more people lose faith in the patriarchal society, so the scariest horror movies feature men and fathers as the villains. So what inspired Lovecraft's horror? Well, one answer is racism. Remember how one of the big horrifying twists in The Shadow over Innsmouth is crossbreeding? Yeah, that was a really big concern of Lovecraft's, that his bloodline was impure. He even had a short story called The Horror at Red Hook, where a group of minorities living in New York turn out to be the villainous murderers. But there's more to it. A bigger, greater fear that inspired Lovecraft's sprawling mythos, and by extension a greater fear that inspired Bill Cipher. You don't need a nightmare Dorito demon or an octopus dragon god to make you feel small or insignificant. Cosmic horror works because we know that on a cosmic scale, we are small and insignificant. We live on a giant rock, hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour around a giant ball of flaming gas that itself is orbiting a supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy, possibly being pulled by an even bigger force out there somewhere, and I guarantee that nothing you could ever do will make a difference to any of that. Black holes, quasars, galaxies, supernovas, these are the real-life eldritch gods, the analogs to Cthulhu and Bill Cipher. Forces of unimaginable power and destruction that don't necessarily consider us with disdain or even indifference. They just don't consider us. Nothing you do will ever make a difference on a cosmic scale. So what do we do? How do we handle knowing our place in the universe? According to Lovecraft, the answer is insanity. But if we ask Dipper and Mabel Pines, the answer is a little different. Love. And no, I'm not talking about the love conquers all trope. I mean that when you're approached with an uncaring universe where nothing we do has any meaning, we make our own meaning. It's something humans have always been good at. We look into the vast depths of space that we'll never be able to explore, and we play a cosmic game of connect the dots for fun. One of the ways that we make our own meaning is through love. Is it a coincidence that the Pines family beat Bill Cipher not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, and every single time it was their bond as a family that did him in? What if the answer isn't to surrender to a harsh and uncaring universe, but to try and make it a little less harsh and a little more caring? This is Singularity, and remember to stay curious.